Stonemeyer Games, and welcome to my weekly Facebook livecast for Stonemeyer Games. You can see we're joined in the background today by Biddy, who's having a little nap and groom in the chair by the window. If you're watching this, or most of you are probably watching this either live or on Facebook, there's also a podcast version of it that you can listen to, in which case you are not looking at Biddy in the background, but he's being pretty cute. Let me start out with today's chocolate of the day. I actually don't have the full packaging, but it looks like this. It's delicious. My friend Alex brought this back from Puerto Rico, and it is 80% cacao from Puerto Rico, and it is really, really good. He brought back a few samples of Puerto Rican chocolate, and they've all been incredibly delicious. Yeah. What other? Okay, so the main thing that I've been doing over the last few days is I went to Geekway Mini. Geekway Mini is a small version of Geekway to the West, which is a local convention that's basically the type of convention where you go and just play games with a bunch of people for a couple days. I went with Megan, a few of my other friends were there, and Megan and I played with a pretty wide variety of people at Geekway, which was awesome. I got to see a lot of people that I've played games with at past Geekways, and a few new people too. And we played a lot of games. My Sunday sit-down video this week coming up will be a ranking of all 13 games, which I usually don't do. I don't usually take I usually do like top 10s, like the best of the best. And this one, I played 13 games. 11 of them were new to me, and I ranked them from 1 to 13. So you'll see that video this Sunday. My Sunday sit-down video from this past week was about, what was it about? It was about sandbox games. It was a little controversial. I've been talking about sandbox games on these Facebook Live videos to get input from you about what you consider a sandbox game to be. And I looked up a few definitions, kind of created my own definition. And if you look at the comments of the video, a lot of people don't agree with that definition of a sandbox game, which to me was a game that presents the player with a set of tools and ways to acquire new tools during the game. And lets the player free in terms of how they want to use those tools, allowing them a variety of ways to actually win the game. So for me, this came down to a number of Euro games, or some Euro games, where you have a variety of different win conditions and different things that you can do in the game, and a variety of tools that you can use to accomplish them. That definition, I think, was very different than other people who associate sandbox games always with open world games. Well, I think they're two overlapping genres that often differ. But feel free to check out that video or offer your thoughts in the comments here if you have different thoughts about what a sandbox game actually is. An example of one that I mentioned in the video was A Feast for Odin, which certainly does not fit into like the video game version of a sandbox game. But A Feast for Odin presents you with a lot of tools, a lot of different things you can do, and a lot of different paths to victory. So I consider it very much a sandbox game. Let's see if I have any questions over here. Tim says, how is the coronavirus affecting your production? Yeah, that's a good question, Tim. I guess first and foremost is the people side of it. A lot of people are being sickened by this coronavirus in China right now, and that is my number one concern. I haven't really talked to Panda at all about the production side of it. They've emailed me a few things, but I've tried to be compassionate towards what they're going through, because I think it's probably a pretty scary time, even in Shenzhen, which is pretty far from Wuhan. And so I don't want to make it about business or games or anything like that. I want to make it about people. Panda did contact me and said that basically the main thing that they know right now is that the Chinese New Year has been extended through February 10th. And so that does impact our production a little bit, because it was going to reopen a little bit earlier than that, and now it's going to open a little bit later. But that really is not, it's, I guess it is on my mind as a businessman, but I'm trying to put the people first right now. So it's a totally fair question, but it's not something that I've talked to Panda much about at this point. Chris says, did you get to play anything at Mini that you were wanting to play? Yes, Chris. Yeah, I got to play lots of things at Geekway Mini that were on my list. Things recommended by a lot of people, like people who watch these videos, people who watch my YouTube videos. And I also played some nice surprises that weren't on my list in the first place. So I'll just mention a few of the games that were on my list to play. I don't have my list in front of me, but I can try to remember offhand. Dogs of War was on the list. Zombie Dice was on the list, kind of a classic game that I've just never played for some reason. What else was on the list that I wanted to play? Uh, I'm blanking. Oh, Silver and Gold was on the list. I'm thinking of other games, but they weren't quite on my original list. I think I checked off like 5 games from my original list, 5 or 6 games, and the rest just were games that came up that people were enjoying and wanted to share, and that I wanted to try. Chris says, "What has been your favorite game that involves polyominoes?" Yeah, Chris, I actually just did a top 10 video game about a top 10 video about my favorite polyomino game 2 weeks ago. So feel free to check out that top 10 list on YouTube. What did I name as my number one? Up there near the top, I know were In the Hall of the Mountain King, Isle of Cats, Cartographers, Feast for Odin, A Feast for Odin. I'm missing one. I'm forgetting one. But look at the list. There's I really like all the games on that top 10 list. They're all, I really enjoy polyominoes. And actually, a number of games I played at Geekoid Mini were polyomino games, including Silver and Gold, Copenhagen, Ship Shape, and I think there's one other that I'm forgetting. Maybe even more than that. Jacobo says, "I heard you saying that Viticulture's playtesters asked you to change the draw 1 card action and to draw 2 cards and keep 1 to mitigate luck of the draw. From a design perspective, could you explain why you didn't follow this path?" Yeah, actually, in this case for Viticulture, it wasn't the playtesters. It was just people playing Viticulture and wanted me to change that. And that there are 2 levels to that. One is so there's a difference, I think, between people playing a published game and asking for something to change versus playtesters asking for something to change. So let me actually answer this from a playtester perspective, because that's a lot easier to make changes when you're actually just playtesting the game when you haven't published it. And for that, the reference here is Tapestry. Tapestry playtesters asked for the draw 2, pick 1. And the reason I didn't do that for Tapestry, or the main reason, is that it slows the game down quite a bit. Drawing a card is a very simple and easy decision. If you actually have a decision point there between the 2 cards, it can, depending on the player, can really slow the game down. And so in Tapestry and in Viticulture, what I ended up doing is just giving players ample cards, ample opportunities to draw cards, whether they're paying for it, or in Tapestry, it's part of your income. So you're just getting more cards all the time. You have so many cards that you can't possibly play them all. And so you have that 2-for-1 decision without it happening during the draw portion of the turn and slowing down the game due to that. My big preference there in games that have a draw mechanism is, rather than do draw 2, pick 1, is to have a card river that you can choose from. But with that, I like cards that have icons only and not text, so that you can read them from across the board. Gurazd says, "Will there be a revised version of Tapestry due to starting changes done for some civilizations?" Nope. All there is there's a single-page guide that you can download from our website that presents you with those starting changes. And that's something that's a living document. That might change over time as we add new civilizations, as we get more data from future playtests, or not playtests, future plays of the game and future reports. But it doesn't need, the game itself doesn't need a new version, new revision. It's just one piece of paper, so it's very easy to print at home. And in future versions of Tapestry, we'll continue to print that piece of. We'll put that piece of paper in the game itself. Let me jump over to my topics real quick, then I'll come back to questions. We just finished game 8 of Clank Legacy, and we continue to love it. Actually, no, we did 8 and 9 in one night. That was the first time that we played 2 games of Clank Legacy in one night. It's because we started a little bit earlier. We also played Rabbit Island. I have a video yesterday about Rabbit Island. And I probably should do a video when I'm done with Clank Legacy to talk about that. We're going to finish up in 2 weeks. And I've been working a lot, I guess Stonemaier Games news is I've been working a lot on the Tapestry expansion. There's an expansion coming out from Tapestry that I'm not going to share details about yet, but I'm really excited about it. We've gotten a ton of great playtest reports. We're through 5 waves of blind playtesting at this point, which is probably enough. I might do a 6th if we have time. But it's not really, I'm really happy with where the expansion is right now. So I'm really excited about that. That's coming along really well. And the next Wingspan expansion, the playtesting for that is coming along well too. I got the reports for that last week and compiled it to send to Elizabeth for her to consider. Brent says, "Given your history of designing great games, do you feel pressure to continue designing great games?" That's nice of you to say, Brett. I think it's highly subjective. Obviously, I try to design and develop and publish great games, but it is highly subjective to who's playing those games. But yeah, my goal is always to design a great, innovative, memorable, unique game. Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely certainly my goal. Yeah. Angel says, "How do I feel? How do I feel? I might be missing a word here, Angel. How do I feel been the image of Tinder in the social media meme? I don't. Could you maybe rephrase that? I don't quite understand Tinder. Tinder. I know there's a like a dating app called Tinder. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. I don't know, but can you maybe say it a different way, and I'm happy to answer it. Chad says he's looking for a medium weight game to play with a friend that I can't focus that he can't get to focus on heavier games. I was thinking about Seven Wonders, Camel Up, or Sheriff of Nottingham. What would you suggest? Any others than the ones that I mentioned? So medium weight game, a game. All those I think are great examples. Seven Wonders, Camel Up, Sheriff of Nottingham. Some of my favorite medium weight. A Downforce I think is an excellent medium weight game. It's certainly on the lighter side, but the decisions made in Downforce I think are a lot of fun. Downforce is great. Scotland Yard. I'm looking at some. I have a lot of games of this genre I think, or maybe that are a little bit heavier. But Downforce, Scotland Yard, On Tour. Depends on how many players you're playing with. Burgle Brothers is probably on the edge of complexity for that. Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye is probably just a little bit too heavy. Sheriff of Nottingham is interesting. It's a great game. I would say that's in that category. Yeah. And actually, really, many of the games that were on Tabletop with Will Wheaton, when that was a show, I think many of those games would fit into the category that you're talking about here. And actually, you could even pick a few of them from that video series and send a few of those videos to your friend and say, hey, which of these looks fun to you? Lords of Waterdeep. Lords of Waterdeep could also be one that you throw in there. Keith asked for a revisit of the chocolate of the day, and I don't remember the brand, Keith. It's chocolate from Puerto Rico that a friend brought back from there that I'm eating today. 80%, which is a little bit darker than I usually eat, but it is really, really good. It's probably the creamiest 80% that I've ever had. Stefan says he played his first game of Tapestry lately and heard about an expansion. Can I give any details? I could give details, but I'm not going to give details yet. Because we're still in the playtesting stages of the Tapestry expansion. But I am very excited about it. I was on a podcast the other day, the Nerd Lab podcast, with Marvin as the host there, and it was a great discussion. I think it'll go live on either next Monday or the following Monday. But if you listen to the Nerd Lab podcast, it's one word, Nerd Lab, you'll see me appear there soon, and it made me want to subscribe to this. I did subscribe to the podcast afterward because it was a great chat. Marvin's clearly like a really good host, really good at answering questions and doing his research. So that's one that I'm gonna start subscribing to. I'm looking at I actually don't have anything pulled. Last week I talked about like what I'm watching or listening to right now, and I don't have anything right now in Chrome that I'm actively listening to. So I need a good podcast for the day. So if you have a specific episode of a specific podcast, put it in the links of this video in the comments, and I'll open a new tab and listen to it later. Good morning, Sonia, Steve. Amin says, I made a Facebook group to build an audience for my game. Do you have any tips to get more members without spending any money? I think a lot of it is about how you engage with the group itself. I think if you don't have a great base for there are many ways that you can get people to discover your group, but if you don't have a good base and it's something good for them to discover when they actually show up, they're not going to stick around. So I'd recommend posting regular, great content in the group itself and actively engaging in the group, asking questions, responding to comments, things like that. Once you have that formed that solid foundation, that can be an opportunity for you to then start reaching out to people and telling more people about the group. Carol says, in the past you've mentioned that you liked Legacy of Dragonholt, reading fantasy, and have thoughts of writing fiction. Have you heard of game books? It looks like they take choose your own adventure to the next level, combining books with game mechanisms. Someone mentioned Destiny Quest, to me when I mentioned that I liked Legacy of Dragonholt. If you have read one of these, did you enjoy it? I thought it sounded like something you could create someday. Well, thanks for thinking of me. Yeah, that I have heard of a few of these books. I've never tried them myself, but I probably should. I mean, I love the idea of participating in in the story of anything. It's one of the reasons I love time stories. It feels like I'm participating in a movie. And Legacy of Dragonholt certainly had that feel to it. So I appreciate the recommendation there. And if you or anyone else has a recommendation of a game book that you would recommend that someone start with, I'd love to hear it. I'd say the one caveat is that I'd love for it to be something that I could play when I'm laying down in bed, which I know is very specific, but that is when I read, when and where that I read. So every night, I usually read for 30 to 45 minutes, and it's laying down in bed with my Kindle kind of propped up on a pillow. So I'd love a book in that genre, ideally even on the Kindle, but it doesn't have to be on the Kindle, that I could read while laying down. So obviously I don't want like a lot of tokens or things to keep track of. So that would be my kind of restraint for as I ask for recommendations for a game book. Keith has joined us from Thunderworks, and Keith, I think I mentioned you last week because I was listening to a great interview with you on the Meeple Syrup YouTube channel. I learned a lot about you, and I have even more admiration for you after watching that. I would highly recommend anyone who wants to learn more about Keith and Thunderworks. He's responsible for Role Player and Lockup and Cartographers, as well as Skullcala, one of my recent plays. Check out the Meeple Syrup YouTube channel. Strada says, is Stonemaier Game also involved in the educational space by actively doing masterclass or having co-create workshops with the young budding game designers across the globe as the community grows? You know, the thing that yes and no. I don't have a masterclass. I don't co-create workshops. But what I do is I create a ton of content with the intent of adding value to other people. If you look at the Stonemaier Games blog, there are hundreds of posts that I've made about entrepreneurship and Kickstarter and crowdfunding, sharing things that my insights, my observations, the mistakes that I've made, things like that with other creators and entrepreneurs. From the game design perspective, I have a YouTube channel that I post on 3 times a week where I share my favorite game mechanism. So it's not a review channel, it's a channel for game designers who want to learn from awesome mechanisms for other games. So my answer, I think, is yes. I create, I think, what I think is really a ton of educational content for anyone to engage with around the world. As you can see in these videos, there's a very active community in the comments. I chime in as often as I can, but also often the comments are just conversations between people who are talking about those games and those mechanisms. Yeah. Angel says, it appears a social media meme. He's referring to his Tinder question from earlier. Tom Bassel is LinkedIn and you are Tinder. How do you feel? I haven't seen that. I guess there's a meme about people in the game industry. Tom Vassel's LinkedIn and I am Tinder. I don't know really what that means. I think Tinder's the one where you like swipe right or left. And so is it a reference to that? I mean, I honestly don't know what it means. Maybe someone can explain that joke. Trisha says, any knowledge on when Wingspan will be released on Steam? I reached out to, I get semi-regular updates from developers who are working on our games. It's not something that I'm intimately involved with. We've basically licensed our games to a variety of different digital game developers, and they work on it independently of us, and occasionally they let me know how it's going. What did they last tell me? I think that they last told me that they're basically working on it, that the beta is going well, and that it will be released, I think, in the first half of 2020, but I don't really know for sure. That's just off the top of my head. I don't really know. Sonia mentioned Dice Forge. I haven't heard of Toria and Gizmos as good medium weight games. Dice Forge I really love out of those 3. Gizmos is very good too. I haven't heard of Toria. Dice Forge might even be a little overwhelming for someone who's looking for a gateway game, perhaps. But it's close. It's right on the edge too. Like it depends on if they're Ticket to Ride level or if they're Ticket to Ride Plus level. I would say Dice Forge is Ticket to Ride Plus. Kaz has a similar question about our digital games. Any word on when Scythe will be released on iOS? I don't know. I think they're still making a decision as to whether or not they want to bring it to iOS, or maybe it's more when they want to bring it to iOS, because I think there is a lot of development that goes into the different programming languages. So unfortunately I don't know. Let me jump back to my topics real quick. I don't think I have much more. Oh, I gave myself a haircut the other day. My goal with my haircuts is don't ruin it, don't ruin everything, and I think I met that goal. I give myself haircuts like once a month. And the Super Bowl. Super Bowl happened in America a few days ago. If you care about football, or if you don't care about football, I think the Super Bowl is fun just to watch with people. And my team was the 49ers, so my team did not win, but I have some friends who are big Kansas City fans, and so I'm happy for them and they're probably much bigger fans than I am of the 49ers. So I'm very happy for them. And I posted a few blog posts about the Super Bowl that had a little bit of controversy. So if you're curious, check out my personal blog, jamiestegmeyer.com, to see some controversial posts about the Super Bowl. Simon says, what do your initial prototype games look like? I've got one on the go made from various components from finished legacy games, which is very clever. You use those legacy game components when you're done with a game. Torn handwritten cards, etc. When do I make the jump to getting it to look like the final thing? I use InDesign for my prototypes from the very start. So I'm not a graphic designer, so they don't look good, but they do look, I don't want to say nicer, but they are not torn handwritten cards. They are designed cutout cards and I do that because I really want to think about the user experience as I'm designing any part of the game. I want to make sure that like for example, if I'm designing a card, yes, I just wanted to get it to the table and see how people interact with that card, but I also want to make sure that the vision that I had for the card actually could work on a card, that I'm not putting too much information on there, that it's not entirely unintuitive the first time. I think this is different than some other designers who just want to get to the table as fast as possible. But for me, I like to think about that user experience, the user interface of the game from the very beginning. So I use InDesign. My prototypes, I think, generally look that they don't have any art on them, but I think they look, in terms of layout, pretty decent from the start. Nothing's like handwritten or anything like that. But I do, like you said, I use components from completed legacy games or random cubes from a variety of games, or cubes that I bought from cube suppliers and things like that, random dice, things like that. So I have a whole closet. That closet behind me is full of prototype components. Pete says, is Sand going to be the next new game from Stonemaier Games? When do I plan to start talking about it? Yeah, Pete, if you look, I think you're probably looking at the chart that I put on our e-newsletter every month. It's also available on the news page of our website that shows the different progress for various projects. And Sand is a new game. I don't know when I'm going to start talking about it, but it is currently the next game that we're going to release. Yeah. Klaus says, I've heard that there's around 3,000 board games released every year. Do I know if that number is somewhat true? I've heard people throw around that number. I've heard even higher numbers, 4,000 games. I don't know for sure, but I have heard Stephen Bonacore of Stronghold Games mention those really high numbers on his kind of State of the Industry podcast that he does, and I think Stephen knows what he's talking about. So I trust that number. I can't verify it, though. I don't really know. Angel says, do I know any Mexican board game designers? I probably do and just don't know it. Offhand, I don't know, but if you name some, I probably would maybe could name their games, but I don't know. It's the nationality that I'm not necessarily aware of. Yeah. Keith says, what's the heaviest game that I've ever played? Will Stonemaier Games be working on a heavy game like TI4, Feast for Odin, or Anachrony in the future? We do. So the thing that I like about heavy games is that they are event games. They are the main feature of the game night, which is something that is a necessity for all of Stonemeier's games. They have to be the event game of the night. But it is not the genre of game that I typically gravitate towards. I'm more of a medium heavy gamer, probably medium. I have played Anachrony. I've played Feast Road is if you're counting that as a heavy game. And I agree, it is pretty heavy. That is a game that I really really enjoy and have played many times. That's been my number one game I think at one point when I did one of my top 10 lists. And I have played TI4 once as well. So of those, I'm not even sure which one is the heaviest. Probably TI4. Yeah, and I have played it once. So yeah, I would say that's maybe one of the heaviest games that I've played. But I would not say, I'm sorry, to answer your question, I would not say that Stonemaier Games is going to publish a game that is of that weight. Um, yeah, we're looking for more like 45 to 90-minute games. And I think it's really tough to have a super, super heavy game within that time range. And there's the accessibility of a heavy game. The accessibility of a rule book, for example, for a really heavy game is much more difficult, I think, for many people to get into than a game with a more streamlined set of rules. Jacobo says, what do I think of the multi-use card mechanism when it's not used as a core mechanism of the game, like in Glory to Rome, but as a secondary mechanism? I think it depends on exactly how the multi-use cards work, but there are certainly games where I've enjoyed that mechanism. I played Maracaibo recently. There are a lot of icons on the cards on Maracaibo, maybe too many, but I do like how they serve a multitude of purposes. I think my favorite use probably of a multi-use card is in no, I'm blanking on that. I'm thinking Rome, but Rome is not the game. You just mentioned Glory to Rome. Root. I'm sorry, Root. Root is my favorite use of multi-use cards, especially since they mean different things to different factions in the game. So they could have given each faction their own deck of cards, but instead they distilled it down to a very streamlined, simple deck of cards and had all players using them in different ways. And I think that is brilliant for Root to do that. So that is, I think, a great example. Although that is almost a core mechanism. Although Root's mechanisms, I don't know if that deck itself is its core mechanism. But I love that mechanism, and I'm actually trying to use it in one of my games. Adam says, what has been the scariest financial choice you've made since starting your company? Honestly, Adam, every time we make a new print run of a game, it's a scary choice. There's a lot of risk every time we make a new print run. It's one of the reasons that I typically aim for like a 10,000 unit print run, because 20,000 units of a game is a lot to make, especially when we could make 10,000 more later. So every time I would say I pay for more than 10,000 units of a game, it's scary. That means that money is going to be tied up for quite some time before we get paid, before distributors pay us. Because when we make a game, we pay half up front, and then there's like 4 or 5 months for the game to be made and shipped, and then another 2 months after that before distributors pay us. So there's usually a 6 to 7 month gap between when we pay and when distributors pay us. So that's scary. Yeah, I don't know if that's the single scariest decision, but it's definitely up there, and that happens all the time because we make a lot of print runs of our games. Sorry, I'm just going through comments here, reading them, looking for questions. If I miss any question, feel free to let me know. I'm not intentionally missing it. Gabriel says, do I plan on having more Scythe expansions? Do I plan on having more Scythe expansions come out on Steam? Would I say that Scythe was a success on PC? I really just get financial reports about it. I'm like I said, I'm not intimately involved in the digital side of our games. We license them to the Knights of Unity and to Asmodee Digital for Scythe specifically. And based on the financial reports, it seems to be doing quite well. And I do hope that they are. I actually know that they are working on adding other expansions, other elements of the game to Steam. But most importantly is for them to hear that from you. So if you actively play Scythe on Steam and you want more content from the developers, let them know. Please let them know, because that will encourage them to act. Jeremy says, am I working out? Yeah, I had a pretty good workout schedule for the last year where I work out almost every day. I do a little bit of weights, a little bit of like sit-up stuff, and then I run up and down the stairs of my building. It's like a little 20-minute workout that I can easily incorporate into my working from home routine. Angel says he has some books for game design in general. What books do you recommend for board game design and building a game community? There's a book that Gabe from the Board Game Design Lab puts together I forget the exact name of the book, but it's if you look at the Board Game Design Lab, you can see more information about that book, and it's basically an interview book where he interviewed a lot of different board game designers and got advice from them. I think that's a great book to start out with. I also just recommend consuming a lot of different game reviews, game perspectives, listening to the Ludology podcast, and the Game Design Roundtable podcast, I think is fantastic. Cardboard Edison compiles a lot of great game design content. My YouTube channel is there for game designers if you want to learn from game mechanisms of other games. There's another one too. I'm blanking on it. It's a cooperative game focused blog that I'm blanking on the name of right now. But they do like a deep dive dissection of a number of cooperative games. I'm forgetting, and they put out a book too. But I'm blanking on the name of it. If any of you know what I'm talking about, feel free to post it in the comments below. Theodore says, "Is my background in art or design? How did I get started designing games?" My background is in my college degree is in international business with a focus in Japanese, and I started designing games when I was a kid just for fun, and I returned to it as an adult because I was excited because I still love designing games, and I saw that games were starting to do well on Kickstarter, and I was like, oh, I have this entrepreneurial spirit, and I love designing games. I'll try to combine those two and see how it goes. And that was back in 2011. So that was, that's pretty much it. Yeah, my background is not in art or design, but I have learned a lot, I think, about art direction and creative design along the way. Gary says, would I like to produce a board game based on a sport? And Gary, I think it's a great question, but I would say no. I actually have a YouTube video about sports, why sports-themed games don't tend to resonate with consumers, or even with me. I think the one exception to that is racing games. I think racing games, for some reason, can do quite well, while other sports-themed games do not. So I think maybe that's the one genre that I would consider a racing game. I love Downforce. I love Camel Up. There's something special about that genre that I really do enjoy. Miles says, did I have a favorite Super Bowl commercial? I liked the Bill Murray commercial, the Groundhog Day one, as like a funny commercial. And as like a more serious commercial, there was actually a Budweiser commercial that I really liked that was about typical Americans, that I thought was really clever, really well done. Yeah. What about you, Miles, or anybody else? Did you have a favorite Super Bowl commercial? Tony says he's rewording his question. Okay, let's see. He says, last night we played Ticket to Ride. Historically, I've always disliked this game. I know it's popular, but I'm never happy to see it come to the table. This is Tony talking, not me. I love Ticket to Ride. Last night I realized that I think my OCD interferes with me enjoying the game. I can't seem to get out of my head that I need to complete a set pattern of a train line, so I struggle with doing one while everyone around me places tracks all over the place. Do I have any games where your personal quirks interfere with your enjoyment of the game, and how would you get past those? That's a really interesting question. I do have certainly gaming preferences and pet peeves and things like that. I'm trying to think of my personal quirks. So a big thing is I do like games with short and quick turns. And so if a game has a number of phases on a turn, or if a game is even broken down into phases, that can be a deterrent for me to enjoy it. I'm trying to think of any specific type of game that I played. Maybe one recently that I don't. Yeah, personal quirks. It's mainly the length of each player's turn that is more my quirk. But I don't know if I'd call it necessarily like in the category of OCD, that type of thing. I guess another thing is I host game night a lot, and so I want everyone to have a good time, and so the games with a lot of like direct conflict, games with I guess the potential to spite another player. Not that the people in my game group would spite each other, but I generally, because of my distaste for spite, I avoid games that have the potential for that. That's the closest I can think. And you also asked how do I get past those. Like if I want to play a game with a lot of direct interaction, like Kemet, then I kind of pick the people that I think will enjoy that and will actually have fun. That the potential for spite could elevate their experience rather than detract from it. Mike says he bought tickets to Geekway to the West for the first time. Looking forward to shaking your hand. That's awesome, Mike. I'm so glad to hear that. And anyone else, tickets for Geekway to the West in June are still available. And if you want to come play games with me there, that's what I do. I try to play games with just a wide variety of people at Geekway to the West. So if you're looking for a great convention to come to in St. Louis in June, where you just play a lot of games and maybe play a game with me, that would be incredible. Forlan says, question for Tapestry isolationists. Oh, I don't have that in front of me right now, Forlan. Could you ask that in the Tapestry Facebook group? That might be a better place and time to answer it, unless someone else can answer it here. Lisa says, I think that Lisa's talking about graphic design and designing games. Keith says, for game books, I'd recommend the Destiny Quest series. Keith, do you have a specific book by any chance in the Destiny Quest series that you would recommend that someone start out with if they want to play a game book? I have the website pulled up here because I think Carol mentioned the same thing. But yeah, like a starting point. I love a starting point. Amin says, will digital versions of board games ever surpass analog board games? I don't think so. No. No. I'm sure we will see more and interesting ways for digital apps to accentuate board games, like the Lord of the Rings game, the Journeys to Middle Earth, and Descent. How they can actually enhance the experience, or really enhance the experience, make it easier to learn, to play, less upkeep. But I don't think they'll come close to replacing the cardboard games themselves, unless everyone in the world becomes a programmer in the next 50 years. Zach says, who made the final decision on what bird to put on the cover of Wingspan? That was actually me. Yeah, I picked that bird. And what process did I use to decide it? I kind of my own internal process. I just I wanted to pick a bird that was that would pop, I guess, on a cover, that would really stand out. I wanted a bird with wingspan. Since the game was named Wingspan, I wanted their wings open. Yeah, I wanted something, I guess, a little dramatic. I didn't want like a pleasant looking bird on a twig. I wanted something that would jump out, and so I chose the scissor-tailed flycatcher. Zach also asked, did I have any other birds you were considering? And yeah, I think pretty much any bird that had the wings open, which aren't a lot in the art. I think that's very difficult for the artist to do. It takes a lot more time, and they already spend a ton of time on the art for these birds. There are a few other birds in the base game. If you look for any bird that has their wings open, they were considered for the cover. Chris says that the book that I was trying to remember the name of from Gabe at the Board Game Design Lab is called the Board Game Design Advice. I'm getting phone calls today. Usually I don't get many calls. Amin mentioned Joe Slack's Board Game Designer's Guide as well, and I agree. Yeah, Joe did a great job putting together that book, and I think I actually wrote maybe the introduction or the preface for that book. Miles says he liked the Sonata commercial with the Boston accents. You know, I was distracted when that was playing, so maybe I need to go back and watch that. Jacobo says, which parameters do I use to judge the weight of a game? If one of them is rulebook length, would I consider a 20-page rulebook heavy? Yeah, I would say rulebook length is one of those parameters. 20-page, I would say, is medium to heavy. I think Viticulture's rulebook might be 20 or 24 pages. I would say that's in the medium to heavy weight, not heavy, but like medium hyphen heavy. So that's one of the parameters. I think parameters, it's also like the complexity of the decisions, the amount of information you're asking players to remember and track at any given time, and just like the number of options that they have at any given time contribute to the weight, in my opinion. Maggie says, will I be at PAX Unplugged? And no, Maggie, I've heard great things, but I won't be there this year. I don't travel to many conventions at all, honestly. It's nice that Geekway to the West is here in St. Louis, and I do attend that one because it's so close. But it's nice that I can just come home every night after that. I'm just reading through comments here, but I'm looking for questions. I do enjoy the comments that I read to myself. Connor says, "What's a theme that I'd like to explore in a future Stonemaier game release that I haven't explored yet?" I love time travel as a theme. I think Time Stories does it incredibly well, but there are other ways to look at time travel. Like Anachrony, someone mentioned earlier, does a really clever thing with time travel. I love time travel as a theme. I love Japan, particularly feudal Japan. I think is a great board game theme. Some great games already have that theme, but I would love to incorporate that into a game someday. Yeah, those two and heist. I love heist themed games. Really, really love. I'm really looking forward to Burger Brothers 2. So those are three themes that I might consider for future games, or they might just end up being like a small part of a future game from Stonemaier Games. Both Carol and Keith clarified that with Destiny Quest, you typically start with Book 1, which makes sense. So I'll if I give that a try, I will start with Book 1 of Destiny Quest. Cool. Thank you all for the recommendation. Yeah, it looks really cool. Simon says, "Have I ever attended any international game conventions? Are you attending any international conventions in the future, like the UK Games Expo?" Currently, I don't have any exact plans to do that, but I'm certainly open to, especially if it coincides with a trip that I'm taking, a special vacation that I'm taking. Like while the convention part wouldn't be vacation, the rest of the trip would be. So I have already been to the UK. I haven't been to all of the UK, but I've been to parts of England and Wales. So that, as much as I enjoyed it, it probably wouldn't be at the top of my list. Nothing against UK Games Expo, but I haven't been to Italy. I'd love to go to Italy, maybe a convention in Italy. I haven't been to Germany, so I'd love to go to one in Germany someday. I'd love to go back to Ireland because I was only in like a very small part of Ireland. So yeah, I'm open to going to conventions internationally, but I currently don't have any necessarily on my list. Kevin says, "Recently Terraforming Mars reached the #1 spot on the Pub Meeple ranking online, making Scythe go down 2 spots. Do I think that's subject to recent expansions for Terraforming Mars?" Might be, yeah. I've heard great things about Turmoil. Are you planning on focusing again with Scythe, or do I think that it's better to have multiple top 10 games like you're doing so far? I didn't know we even had multiple top 10 games in the Pub Meeple ranking. Focus again with Scythe. We're kind of done. Well, we are done making content for Scythe, the current game Scythe. So I hopefully people continue to discover it and enjoy it. It's a game that I'll continue to send to reviewers and to play and win sections at conventions so more people can discover it. But competing for rankings isn't really, that's not part of the goal. It's just I want to expose it to anyone who might have fun with it. Yeah. Angel says, "Can I repeat the name of the event where we can meet you in July?" It's in June and it's called Geekway to the West. Vincent says, "If I could only play one game forever, what game would it be?" His is Scythe. Well, thank you, Vincent. I'm flattered that your forever game would be Scythe. For me, what game would I play forever? I mean, it would be definitely be one of the games on my top 10 list. One that I've said before is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I really, really love Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and I never really get tired of it. Even just playing the base game, I never get tired of it. So I'd probably pick that. Yeah. Although, a Feast for Odin might have to be up there, too. I really enjoy Feast for Odin, and that's one that is very different from game to game, or can be very different from game to game. That would be one that I could play for a long, long time, too. So I would say one of those two. Joe says, "Have I played Escape Plan by Vital Lacerda?" I have not, no, but I need to try that. Yeah. Cody says, "I'm in the middle of my 5th remake on my own board game." I feel you, Cody. Games go through a lot of different versions, don't they, when you're designing them? Your number one piece of advice for reaching out to find new playtesters. He says, "How do I coax you to come to play?" Unfortunately, I wish I could play test games for other people, but it's not a priority for me. I have to focus on the games that we're making. But yeah, for finding new playtesters, I think the easiest way, or not the easiest way, but look at meetup. I think it's .org.com, meetup.org, and find local playtesting game groups and go playtest other people's games and also playtest your games. That's not for blind playtesters. There's resources on our website for finding blind playtesters, but for getting the ball rolling on local playtesting with people that aren't your friends, which I think is going to be pretty important, is I think Meetup can be a real asset for that. Carol says, have I tried the new Time Stories system yet? I haven't, but I'm super excited. And a friend actually just mentioned that they got it. I had it on my wish list for when it was going to come out, but a friend apparently has it. So I'm going to try it quite soon. But I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know yet. George says, another great book to read is from Jeremy Holcomb, Board Game Design Advice. It comes with a white box design kit. That's pretty cool. Dan Hopper says, which designer would I like to co-design with you that I haven't been able to co-design with yet? So my answer is kind of weird with this because there are designers that I absolutely love. I mentioned Keith earlier in the podcast. Keith, Alexander Pfister, Rob Davio, Uwe Rosenberg, some of my favorite designers. I have had the opportunity to co-design with Uwe Rosenberg, a small expansion for viticulture, and that was incredible. But one thing to keep in mind there, that I've tried to keep in mind, is that just because someone is one of my favorite designers, Ryan Lockett's up there too, doesn't mean that we would actually get along as co-designers, especially since all those people I think are used to being lead designers. So all the people that I've co-designed games or expansions with have let me take the lead, and they have played a very important role in it, and often a significant role, but they have played a role. They are not the lead designer, because I think I like to be the lead designer in most cases. There's very few things where I like to just hand it off and say, okay, I'll help out a little bit, but you handle most of the design. So I don't know. Actually, I don't have a great answer to this question because I don't know how those people would be to work with, despite my love of their games. In fact, I'm kind of impressed with a Return to Dark Tower recently. Two amazing designers, Rob Davio and Isaac Childress, co-designed it, and that's incredible. That two designers that I think are very used to being lead designers were able to work together in that way. It probably helped a little bit that Rob has so much experience working with a variety of co-designers that Rob is probably pretty flexible in doing that. So, why don't I make that my answer? I think Rob Davio, I think he's so used to working with a variety of other different designer types that I think he probably would be a lot of fun to work with. And I think we would probably create something pretty special together. So I'll say Rob Davio, who's most known for legacy games. Dan followed up to say, would I ever publish a Reiner Knizia game? Maybe. I think Knizia designed Ra, which is one of my favorite games. So if Ra hadn't been reprinted in such a nice way by Fantasy Flight, that might have been a title that I would have pursued, because I think it's an amazing game. Hopefully I don't have that wrong. Hopefully that is actually a Knizia game. Simon says, the artwork and idea of Parks is great. Have I managed to check out the Parks expansion on Kickstarter yet? I have, yeah. I haven't backed it yet. I did just play Parks 2-player the other day, and I think I enjoyed it even more, maybe even substantially more than the 5-player game of it I played the first time. I really enjoyed the 2-player game. It was nice back and forth, just a lot of fun. I haven't backed it yet because I had so much fun playing it 2-player that I was like, I don't know if I necessarily need an expansion for this, but I'll have to check it out because it looked like they added like campsites or something like that, like a new token you can put on the trail, and that looked interesting that they're adding a new mechanism without completely changing the game. I like expansions that do that. Looks like I reached the end of the questions, so let me recap what I talked about today in case someone wants to bring up any of these topics again. I talked about some of the games I played at Geekway Mini this past weekend, and this coming Sunday I'm doing a Sunday sit-down video ranking those 13 games that I played at Geekway Mini. I finished my 8th game of Clank Legacy. I played and did a video about Rabbit Island. My Sunday sit-down video this past week was about sandbox games. I've been working a lot on the Tapestry expansion and a little bit on the Wingspan expansion. I was on the Nerd Lab podcast, where I'm not on it yet. I've recorded it, and it will go live on Monday or the following Monday. I gave myself a haircut recently, and I watched the Super Bowl. I had a good time watching the Super Bowl the other day. So those are the topics I covered. Let's see if there are any more questions, and if not, I will post this thing on YouTube. Looks like we're all done here, so thank you so much for joining me today and asking these questions and joining the conversation. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Take care.